Well, thank you for joining us tonight. We're thrilled to have you. First of all, can you start by telling us how you came to be in the situation to get all of these session jobs? What took you out to LA?
About a 2-year story.
Okay, we'll condense it just a little maybe.
I'm going to condense it way down. My friend that I've known since high school, James Burton, took me to Los Angeles and put me in Ricky Nelson's band. And I can say, for me to have been involved in all of that music that I was involved in, I had to be in LA as a bass player in a situation that would get me noticed. Well, James put me in that situation with Ricky Nelson's band, and that was the door that took me to all that music. There's a lot more to that.
We'll be around a little bit afterwards, and so you can get more details from him. But one of the things you said is this was work. This was a job. You were going into work every day. You didn't know that you were making hits necessarily. You didn't know that you were making music that was going to be around decades later. But you did say that there was one song that you had an idea was going to be a hit while you were recording it. Do you remember what you told me? Do you remember which one it was?
I think you're talking about Bridge Over Troubled Water.
Yeah, can you tell us a little bit about that, about recording that?
Those guys were always fun to work with because the music was always great. The songs were always great. But the way they went together, everybody remembers that great piano part on that song. Larry Knechtel and Art Garfunkel went in the studio and worked on that just together, and Larry came up with that great piano part, playing to a click track. And when they got that done, then they called me and Hal in to overdub to what they had done. And that took at least a week just to get that, because the way they worked and their engineer, Roy Halley, you would play things and then, okay, we'll do it again. He never erased anything. He saved everything, from track to track. And when we did all we could possibly do, worn out, he would go and take pieces from each track and build a track. Wow. So we never really knew what we played was going to wind up on the record. But
and then they were trying to decide which one was going to be the single, and you knew which one it was going to be.
I knew that was a big break. I loved that song, and I didn't love many of those songs. Most of them I didn't like. There were a lot of them that I really hated. Turned out to be a #1 record. I'd go back and listen. See, well, what did I miss? And I still didn't like it. But I knew that song was great. I overheard a conversation in the studio when they had the album almost ready, trying to figure out what the single was. At that time, they didn't put out a whole album at once. They put a single. You don't know what the single is. I didn't say this, but don't they know what that is? Bridge Over Troubled Water.
Well, and I think tonight may have been the first time I've ever heard spontaneous applause break out in the middle of a movie for your bass line for Let the Sun Shine In. So you brought a first here to the Robinson Film Center. Woo! Yeah.
If I have to say, I've asked the question, what was your favorite part you ever played? Well, I do. That's one. For a rhythmic part, that has to be my favorite. There was a Carpenters song, For All We Know, that I had a beautiful part. It went right with the vocal. That's my favorite of that sound.
Speaking of the Carpenters, tell us a little bit about how you came to be involved with the Carpenters and how you met them.
Well, I had a studio in my garage out in the valley, and they came in one night. That studio turned out to be a playpen, really, for all my musician friends to come over, hang out. Sometime we'd play and record something. They came in one night with a horn player that wanted to see if I could use him on some tracks. And I I didn't know who they were. The 16, Kern 16, and Richard was 18. But they came to play for this guy in his horn part. And so when he got done, I don't even know what he sounded like. But they stayed around, and Richard asked, I didn't know either of their names at the moment. Can we play something? So they did a song called Ebb Tide, which is not a simple song for anybody. The girl, 16 years old, sung that, and that voice was there at that age that she died with, that wonderful magic voice. Ella Fitzgerald quoted one of the greatest voices of all time, talking about Karen Carpenter. But anyway, we talked, and what do you guys want to do? You know, Richard had some songs he wanted to demo, he wrote. They couldn't afford a studio, so I go, bring it on over here and let's do your demos. We did that for about 2 years, on and off. So somewhere, I played them to some producers, including Bones Howe, and he did turn them down. He regretted that later. One time on a Bones Howe session, I think it's 50 mentioned, he asked Hal to do a drum fill. He said, you know, that Carpenters type fill. He looked at me and said, I never thought I would say that. Anyway, they took some of those tapes from the garage and got their deal with A&M. And I was still able to play on all that.
Well, I have one more question, and then I'm going to turn it over to all of you. So get your questions ready. I know that you have a lot. But my last question is: you spent much of your career in Los Angeles, and then you went and had kind of act 2 of your session career in Nashville. Can you tell us a little bit about the differences in those 2 music scenes?
Well, it wasn't as different as I hoped. I was really covered up with the pace in L.A. and I was tired. I wanted to really quit. Thought I was going to move to the Ozarks. A friend of mine said, "And you don't want to quit. You just want to do it in a different place." All right. Well, Nashville was the obvious place, so I went to Nashville, and that all started to build very quickly. And as far as the differences, it wasn't as much as I hoped. It was just really the same. The same. I played on more hit records in Nashville than I did in L.A. All those country records.
Which is one source that I read is over 200 hit records. Does that sound about right?
That's probably half of that's all I can remember.
Estimate. Yeah.
You said, did you play on that? I don't know. I know I can remember the people, but I don't know what the records, what the songs were. And if I don't know for sure, I don't claim it. Some people would.
Okay, audience, who has a question for Joe? Alex has a microphone. He's going to try to get around to you, but yes.
What was the favorite song that you played on?
Yeah, that's really funny. That's usually the first question. And you might as well ask, who's your favorite kid?
Who's your favorite kid?
Well, all right, if I was going to try to answer that, the tendency is to go to the biggest one, which is not necessarily right, Bridge Over Troubled Water is probably one of the biggest ones. Aquarius, Let the Sun Shine In was another big one. Records of the Year. I don't know.
That's good.
Yes.
Well, taking that question the opposite direction, what was your least favorite song you worked on?
That's pretty much it. To play on that many hit records, you got to play on a lot of real bad ones. You heard all that described. You take the call as it comes. Somebody be there at 2 o'clock Tuesday at the Capitol Records, and we didn't look at who it was. It was a session and all they paid to sing. And you don't say, well, I better save this time for Elvis. He ain't gonna call. So we take them as they come, and we treat everyone as if it's best thing we ever did.
Yeah.
But there are some that you didn't like.
Well, there were some that were just really, really bad and no fun and hard. And well, one of the things that made it hard sometimes is an idiot producer that thinks if he's not flapping his mouth, he's not doing his job. He's telling us things to play that are not good, not possible, but still it's our job to understand that and give him what he needs. And the best way, well, play the song, play the song. All right, that tells you what to play. And when you come up with something really good for his song, he'll come out and say, that's exactly what I had in mind. So, we saw it all, and had to deal with it.
Yes, and toward the back.
I was kind of curious. You said there were some songs that you thought were terrible and they became #1. Was there anything that was kind of the opposite, that you thought it was going to be a smash hit and it just bombed?
Were there any recordings you did that you thought were going to be a big hit, and when you were surprised that they didn't hit it big?
Well, no, not really. I knew Bridge Over Troubled Water was, and it was. It would be more the other way. It would be so. I didn't think it had a shot, and it would. So we never knew. We didn't hear the finished record. All we heard was the rhythm track and a scratch vocal, and we would lay that. We didn't hear the finished product until it was on the radio. So there's no way to really judge that in the studio, except if you like the song. Yeah.
Yes.
What was your experience growing up playing bass when you first started learning how to play? What was your experience like?
Learning how to play?
Yeah, right, just playing around, first learning how to play.
Well, I was this is about 1959, before all that came about, playing in Las Vegas with a country band, Bob Levin's band. I don't know if you remember who Roy Buchanan is, great guitar player. Me and him were playing in the same band, both playing guitars. And I was, him and Bob figured, well, somebody needs to play bass. And I was elected to do that, so I went to play bass, and the next night I was the bass player. I didn't decide anything. People, how did you decide to be a bass player? I didn't decide anything.
And how long had you been playing guitar? When did you start doing that?
Oh, I was 12. Same age as Matthew Davidson. He started a little before that. When I met him, he was playing at 12 years old. It was wonderful. Davidson's my friends here. That's Matthew there. Also glad to see my church band back here from Calvary Baptist Church in Minden. Whole band, including the choir director, they're all here tonight. Thank you for coming. My dentist is the drummer, and he got me involved during drilling.
Yeah, tell us that story. tell them that story.
Yeah, well, he's drilling my tooth, and he mentioned that he knew I was a musician of sorts, and he mentioned that he was practicing with his church band, and they didn't have a bass player. So, drilling my tooth. So that's how I got started with that. Thank you.
Yes, in the back.
When the artists you were backing up realized that their bands couldn't cut it, what did they do when they played live? I only saw a little bit of that in the movie. Did they try to get y'all to go on tour with them, or were you too busy?
When you were replacing bands in the studio, what was their reaction to not being on the record? And were you ever asked to go on tour with those bands?
No, we didn't go on tour. We did some special things, like we did 6 weekends with Simon and Garfunkel, because their plan for that was to do a live recording at Carnegie Hall in New York. We went through there on one of those weekends. But no, as a rule, we stayed in town. Well, we didn't know the musicians in the band. That decision was made by the producer, that that had already worked with us on many records. So, and playing in the studio and playing live is two different worlds. And the road bands didn't understand that. They didn't know why they weren't there. Because when we got the record done, they had to learn what we did and play that live. So it sounded like, well, they probably played on the record. And that's which is what they wanted. Was that what you asked?
Yes.
Yes, here.
What was your favorite project to play on, and what do you want to be remembered for?
Favorite what?
What was your favorite project that you worked on, and what do you want to be remembered for?
Oh,
Sorry.
I don't have a favorite of those. They were all the
Well,
same.
it's fun.
They just all ran together, you know. To be remembered for that, I did the best I could. And somehow it worked.
I think we have time for one more, and there it is. Yes.
It's a two-part.
Okay.
Now, I wasn't clear in the movie, did you play on the session for California Dreamin'?
Right.
Okay, then my second part is just a comment between Ricky, the Mamas and the Papas, Simon and Garfunkel, and the Carpenters. I listen to you every day. I just didn't know it. And so thank you very much because you've enriched my life tremendously.
That's another thing. We didn't have any idea of what this music would be in the future, and that we were actually influencing people with that music. I've had bass players come up to me and say, I've been making a living playing the bass for 30 years, and you're the reason I started. Well, that's moving. To know that we actually influenced people with what we were doing. We had no idea that was going on.
The soundtrack of our lives.
Amen.
Amen.
Mine too.
I read a quote a couple weeks ago that said if you were listening to the radio in the 60s and 70s, you heard Joe Osborn at least once an hour all day long. And I would say, and I think Joe mentioned this too, that even today, depending on what radio station you're listening to, the things that Joe recorded in the 60s and 70s and 80s are still being played today. So I just echo everyone's thank you. Also, thank all of you for coming tonight. Joe's going to stick around for just a little bit in the lobby, so I know some of you may have a couple more questions or want to get a chance to meet him and shake his hand. But one more time, please, please, please give our thanks to Joe Osborn for being here.